So thank you for coming and being willing to do this with us. Can you tell me what sparked your interest to bring your musical and creative program to a conference centered on coaching and leadership?
Well, it's interesting. We were just talking about this outside, that ultimately I think what I do, a conductor, it really is, in a way, the ultimate kind of coaching. And even more than just being a coach, you're a coach with a completely different set of skills and language skills, that you have to speak and communicate with people without using your mouth at all. So it's all body language. And hopefully it'll bring an interesting perspective to the attendees here.
That's great. And in terms of the creative piece, to bring creativity and the importance of creativity to coaching, any comment on that?
Yeah, it's funny for you to say creativity. For me, as creativity as if it's a thing outside me. Do you know what I mean? For me, it's like oxygen. I can't imagine not bringing creativity to that. I guess what I would want the attendees to feel is a sense of liberation, that they feel totally free to explore and experiment. One of the things Bobby McFerrin, the musician, says all the time, he says, with musicians, we play music, and the important word is play. And I bring that to every rehearsal and every performance that I have, that really we're just playing. We're still kids in a sandbox. And so if people can be fearless about their creativity, then the rest follows pretty nicely.
Cool. Can you describe the program you're going to do today a little bit?
Yeah, so today what I'll do is I've brought a 50-piece choir with me. Hopefully that's the first time that's happened at the convention. And we'll perform a piece of mine, a piece called Lux Aurumque, which means light and gold. And then I'll talk a little bit about how I came to music. And then I'll explore the virtual choir, this crazy online venture that I have been developing over the past couple of years. Show some video clips from that, talk about the origins of it. And then I'll take and conduct the choir itself, deconstruct the pieces, talk about what it is a conductor does, how do we communicate with each other, how to make the singers as good as they can be, and then wrap it up with another piece at the end.
Very cool. If we were looking at any one of our participants, most of whom are coaches, they're all from different disciplines, what would be your hope for what they walk out of here having taken away from your presentation?
Well, my biggest hope would be that they would join the next virtual choir, even if they're not very good singers. My first and biggest passion, are you a singer?
No.
Yeah, but now you're in trouble because I want you to join. My first and biggest passion is singing and making music, and especially for the amateur musician. So if even one person in that room says, maybe I'll try choir, if I can be the gateway drug for just one person in there, my day would be made. Bigger than that, I would hope that everyone would come out of there possibly with just a slightly left of center look at ways of communicating with a large group of people and how to build a sense of community with people in untraditional ways.
It's such an important piece of what we're doing at this conference and with the association. Any way that we can foster building community. So I think hopefully we'll hit that objective. Can you talk to me a little bit about what the virtual choir is?
So the virtual choir is, let's see where to start. Virtual choir is this crazy idea that I had. I received a fan video. This young girl, 17 years old, she was looking right into the camera and she said, "Hi, Mr. Whitacre, I love your music and I just want to make this video for you." And then she sings the soprano line to a piece that I'd written, looking directly into the camera. It's so beautiful and haunting. And as soon as I saw this video, I thought to myself, what if I could get 100 people to all do this at the same time? So they're alone in their room somewhere in the world, and they sing their parts, soprano, alto, tenor, or bass. Somehow we line them all up and get them all to sing at the same speed and cut them together, and it should make a choir. This was my idea. So I uploaded a conductor track, myself conducting the piece, and then everyone sitting wherever they were in the world watched me conducting and then sang back to me and recorded their little part alone in their room, uploaded it, and when we cut it together, it actually worked. And not only was it, not only did it work, but it's actually musical. The music has life and breath to it. It somehow seems to transcend the technology. It's pretty thrilling.
Very cool. How many people?
So for the first video, our first experiment, we had 185 singers from 12 different countries. And we were very, very excited about that. For the one that we just finished this past year, there were 2,052 singers from 58 different countries. And we're just getting ready to launch number 3 right now, and God knows how many we'll have for that.
Can you tell me a little bit about the people you've brought for this choir?
Yeah, so it's a combination. There's 2 different choirs joining forces today for the first time. One are singers from the New England Conservatory, some of the best musicians on the East Coast. And the other is a friend who I actually met over the internet, a conductor, a young woman who started her own choir here in Boston. And so I called her and said, can we combine your choir with New England Conservatory? She said yes. So just one more internet connection, I suppose, on stage.
I love that it's all experimental, and I love that it's building. That's what I'm hearing you say. It's just building almost organically as you go forward.
Yeah, and I think organically, the way that it's building organically, that's the perfect description for it, because at some point relatively early on, I lost control in the best possible way. It just started doing it on its own. People of all different disciplines rose from the crowd and started taking on different jobs. And I sort of acted as executive producer, if you will. But it most certainly has a life of its own now. Now it's just this incredible robot that I seem to have pushed the button on, and it's doing its own thing.
One of my favorite phrases for coach, rather than executive producer, would be facilitator. And I can put that word into your description. And you've facilitated this amazing thing, and you continue to, in growing and
That's much
continuing.
better than executive producer.
Well, you come from a different part of the country than we do. You know, the languaging is a little different, so it works.
Actually, though, I lived in Los Angeles for 14 years, so the language you're speaking is actually the language that I'm used to speaking. Facilitator, that's how we'd say it.
I learned in San Francisco, so okay.
I've been living in London now, and so everything is quite square.
Anything either of you want to add?
Yeah. Let me just looking over your shoulder.
Come behind me so that he's looking in the same direction, or take my seat.
Oh, all right.
It's like speed dating.
Don't tell Ruthie.
Well, first of all, let me free-form question. Can you say sort of anything off the top of your head about similarities between conducting and coaching?
Just off the top of my head. So conducting and coaching, I think, are incredibly similar in that what you're trying to do is empower a group of people to become autonomous. Ultimately, your ultimate goal is to become irrelevant and let them make the magic. One of the things that I'll describe in my talk today is the feeling when it's going very well that you're really just riding the wave. It's more like surfing than it is actually doing the work. And one thing that I've learned as a conductor, and it's taken me a long time to get there, is to let go quite a bit. That there's this sense, I don't know if it's the small mind that needs to control or thinks it's in control, that's probably a better way of describing it, but in fact it's not. That this thing is happening here and all it needs is just gentle motions, and you can push the wave in any way you like.
You know, what's great is we talk about how beginner coaches use specific models and masterful coaches work with emergent process. And you're really talking about working with emergent process.
Really?
Yeah, because the process emerges and same language. We talk about surfing the wave.
Do you really?
Yeah, quite literally. Occasionally I call that surfing the tsunami. But maybe you could just sort of share again what things you've learned about working with emergent process, kind of being in that moment. Just what have you learned, what wisdom?
You mean specifically? You mean, for instance, specific to the act of conducting? Musical examples, do you mean? Or more?
Speak from what you know. Just
thank you.
You know, like just the idea of like, you know, coaching is emergent process, and what can you teach us?
It's funny because I hear exactly what you're asking for. I think as a musician, I'm hyper pragmatic. So every time I start to go into what feels like a lofty explanation of something, I snap back down to, well, here's how it actually works in front of a group of people. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to. Yeah, exactly. Ask me again what it is that you're looking for.
From your work with music, which is an emergent creative process, what have you learned that might be helpful for coaches as they're working with emergent process?
Yeah, I don't have the language for it. Talk to me a little bit more. When you say emergent process, what do you mean exactly?
Sort of suddenly taking advantage of what just springs up in the moment. Because it sounds like that's exactly what you do. You hear what's happening and you do something with it. And we're thinking that's similar to what coaches do with words, what you're doing.
Okay, so perhaps I can say this. So I have found that as we talk about riding the wave, surfing this wave, letting the wave do the work, that there's, especially in music, there's a constant from moment to moment that you're changing slightly. They do this, you do this, you do that. There's a dance happening all of the time. And so in a way you have to be incredibly flexible and fluid while this is happening. But at the same time, what holds true from the beginning, even before the music starts, is your intention. What is your vision for the thing? And the path changes constantly, but somehow you end up at the end of the journey with the intention realized. It looks different, but it tastes the same, if that makes sense.
Well, you may not know it, but you have just described complexity theory exactly.
Complexity theory, really?
Yeah. What you do in coaching complexity theory, what you say is you start out with, you have an idea of the end game, you set up the basic boundaries, and you let it go. And that is actually how you master what complexity can give you.
I have to come to the conference some year. It takes. Yeah. I mean, it sounds fascinating, really.
Yeah, what you do is basically managing complexity, keeping it right this end of chaos.
Yeah, exactly. So the attendees, they're medical professionals, and they're overseeing.
Well, so some are medical professionals, some are executive coaches, nurses. We were talking a lot about complexity theory. I get most of that from the work at the B School, but yeah.
There's business people, there's executive coaches, there's personal coaches, there's social workers, there's just about anything. People come into coaching from whatever their background is in a lot of ways, and some of them come
musicians
in to change. Yeah, there are probably some artists in the room.
Oh,
there's just about anything.
So it's all over the map.
It is.
Okay, well, that's very interesting.
Very broad.
And there are people who are learning to lead organizations in a certain way, or also just to facilitate their own creative.
The corporate types are either coaching individual executives, and of course, and their brains all work differently, their circumstances work differently. So when you turn up as a coach, you have to find ways.
You have to do exactly what you described.
Open people up and get.
Yes,
so,
I see. And they're teaching executives how to do this.
Well, they're actually coaching them towards their outcomes. So that in the conversation, they're talking about, here's where I want to go. My dream is to be better at delegating and facilitating and bringing out the best of people. And so then you're navigating a path, and you don't have a roadmap when you start, except you have a vision for where they want to go, and they have a vision. I mean, they need the vision too. That's in fact, often they're creating the vision. That may be one distinction. The coach is usually not defining the vision. So we're helping them really find the road as quickly as possible, but it can go all over the place to get to that, to realize that intention. But then you also have coaches who work with teams, who will facilitate a team of people, leaders, who are then using the team dynamic to deliver the intention.
Right, that makes me think of another question. So we'll see whether this lands or not. What Marva and I have been very involved with, and Joan too, is positive psychology, which is when you're coaching someone, you really build on their strengths, and like you don't concentrate on what they can't do, you concentrate on building what they can do.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I was wondering if you could speak on kind of how do you do that as a conductor with lots of people, build on the strengths of the people you're working with?
Well, so as a conductor, one of the ways that I build on the strengths of the people that I'm working with is to very early on identify what their strengths are. This I found to be a great skill. And what I'll usually do, one of the things that I'll do today in my talk is I call it taking the choir out for a drive. And so we'll take just a little snippet of music, and then I'll conduct them through all sorts of variations of it, different ways of, and what I'm really doing is, first I'm teaching them the language that I'm going to be using as we're making music. But then second, I'm really testing their limitations and seeing how far can I push this, how far can I pull this. Oftentimes I'll give them, we'll stop and I'll give them 5 or 6 different instructions. Next time we need this, this. And then I'll just see, in terms of retention, what are they, what have they absorbed? And then I'll try different tricks with them. Some groups, even different groups of musicians, work better with imagery. Some work better with physical application. Mostly, though, it really does have to be with being as flexible and in the moment as possible, and learning as quickly as you can this magical beast that you're working with.
So in a way, the choir adopts its own persona,
yeah,
a collective persona.
Exactly. It has its own personality. No
Yeah.
no
So it's not the strengths of any individual singer.
No, not at all.
It's actually, so this really ties in with organization, because there's something called appreciative inquiry, which is a strategic planning process that's all about focusing on appreciating all the good and building on that, as opposed to focusing on the gap and trying to fix that. Like if you knew that you had, this was the weakness of the choir, if you focused on getting them to go over and over and over until they fix that, that would be very different than identifying what they're really good at collectively, and then just working on that energy, because that energy, when you use your strengths, you're energized. When you use your weaknesses, you're depleted. So what you want is you want more energy.
Yeah,
and you want higher quality energy.
It's very true.
And then you want to harness that.
So how do we flip that into another question, which is...
Real quick, how are we doing on time? I just want to make
we're,
sure
we're 10 minutes of.
10 minutes of 3. Great, okay.
Yeah, we won't let you go over.
Oh no, I just want to make sure that I just have a little time with the choir.
Oh,
Actually, I don't want to have too much time with them though. I want to be fresh for the presentation.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
So they'll all be
Well,
scared.
I have a question, if I can jump in. Did you have one or
Well,
two?
so my question, which was just, are you aware of what you do that energizes the choir that you're working with?
You mean, am I consciously aware of it?
Yeah, I mean, do you go in and say, here are the 5 things that this is how I'm going to be in the moment?
I was thinking more, when you're working with a choir and you have a sense that they need more energizing, do you have a sense of what you've done that works when you do that? Not so much, if you planned it in advance, it wouldn't be emergent process?
Yes, so if I'm working with a choir and I'm in that moment where they need energy, I have a bag of tricks that I can, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. The easiest way is just to completely shake things up, especially with singers, and everybody's going to stand up, let's jump up and down, or let's give back massages, or just something to shake, to clear the mind and hit the reset button. I have a natural response, it's totally intuitive, that seems to really work, and that's that if something is just in tune and incredibly musical, I uncontrollably giggle. And that giggle seems to please the singers, and so there's this constant feedback that I'm giving them that's rooted in just pure joy coming from me. I get a lot of feedback about that they sort of live for the giggle.
Well, it's really interesting because our earlier talk today was about how the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part that's connected to joy and renewal, what are ways to activate that? And if you can activate that, you get greater range of performance from people.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
It's just interesting hearing you because
And there's a right ratio of positive and stress. And because you need the stress, but you also need the positivity as sort of to make it buoyant.
What was your question?
Well, so I wanted to put it to change the perspective from what you do with a choir to how do you renew yourself as a coach, and like what are the variety of things that you do? Because you record, you conduct. I mean, we know you from YouTube, but that isn't how you make a living, surely.
You mean from
the YouTube?
Being on YouTube? There's no money from virtual choir.
That's it, right? So what have you crafted as a collection of things you do that renew you, that keep you growing, that keep you energized?
Well, for me, to remain energized, Ray Bradbury, the author, I read years ago a quote by him, and I hold it so dear to my heart, and he says simply that if he forces himself to go out night after night and go to art galleries, to see plays, to see beautiful music, that somehow the next morning, almost like magic, appears this fountain of creativity. And I've found that in my life. I force myself out of my house or out of my comfort zone and go to see something, and there's, even if in the moment I'm not moved by it, there's something that seems to happen during the night when I'm sleeping and dreaming, where I'm refreshed and I've evolved over the night. And so I guess what I'm trying to do constantly is experience things, just experience new things. Yeah, I guess it's an active part of my life. We've just moved to London, my family and I, and that was a pretty big move. And it was all rooted in that philosophy that, all right, let's shake things up a little bit here and refresh.
You know, there's some very interesting research about that too. Remember that we heard at IPA that you can work on something, and then you switch to do something else, and what you were working on, the part of your brain that was active when you were working on this, actually still keeps going when you're working on something else. So that when you come back, you've actually learned something in the interim.
Yeah, I believe that.
It's an incubation concept that
Yeah.
And then the next would be, that's a way of refreshing yourself in almost kind of personal life. But in your work, what are the elements of your work that you've combined? You conduct, you record, you compose.
Yeah, so I'm a composer, I'm a conductor, I'm a speaker. I own a small publishing company.
Book publishing?
No, a sheet music publishing company. I'm a model. I have a modeling contract in London. Sorry.
You do?
I can't say it with a straight face. I am sorry. Yes. So I have all of these different pursuits and it's interesting, the thing about the modeling, I laugh because really the reason I took it, it makes good business sense, but really the reason I took it was because I just thought it would be a kick in the head, that I couldn't wait to have all these experiences. And going to, I'll be going to Fashion Week in Milan and getting cool clothes, and it's another one of these experiences that might not normally come to me otherwise.
Okay, so now we have to ask, what out there experiences have you not yet done that you think you'd like to?
You mean about anything? And these are PG-13, I'm assuming? No.
Yeah. We'll just edit the part out, no.
Yeah, tell us. Cut it out.
We said we'd give him a very special speaker experience.
It's funny, I think my life these days is so, to put it in a very positive way, so rich with activity, that the thing that I would love to do, truly love to do, is somehow check out for an entire month, to take my wife and my son and go to a Greek island with no internet access or telephone access and fish and cook dinner and run on the sand with my son. And that would be truly a dream. It's funny how the world has turned upside down, isn't it? Where that's this impossible to achieve situation, and all the other stuff doesn't seem to be such a problem.
Yeah, well,
I'm going to cut you guys off because we have to get him to his people, and I've got all kinds of stuff. So one more question.
Oh, thank you. So that's a sign of a need for recovery and rejuvenation. So as a coach, how could you build that into your day-to-day life? Little Greek island times.
Now that we're talking personally, as a coach, I would have all kinds of advice, but personally, I'm not sure they would apply to me, because it's not that I have an obsessive personality, but for instance, when I'm composing, it just takes over every cell in my body, and there is no respite from the hurricane that I'm feeling inside my heart, if you know what I mean. And the only thing that stops it is being finished. And so once I've gone down the path, then I'm in. The one single thing that seems to bring me joy endlessly, no matter what the situation, is my son. I have this 6-year-old boy, and it's just endless. It's sort of breaking my heart being away now and every time. Do you have kids? Yeah, so you know.